She is no longer my blood. Terracus Neilwort, alpha of the Neilwort pack, said it the way he said everything, without hesitation, without apology, without once looking at the person the words were meant to destroy. He stood on the raised platform at the north end of the clearing and spoke to 200 wolves as if his daughter were not standing 10 feet away. No longer pack. No longer welcome on Neilwort land. Any wolf who shelters her shares her exile. He was not accusing her of a crime. He was condemning her for what she was. The torches guttered. The crowd did not move, because nothing was what Terracus Neilwort's pack had learned to say when he decided something. Violet stood where the disgrace stood and kept her hands still at her sides. She had practiced this. The stillness. The silence. The art of giving nothing away to people who had already taken everything. Then a voice came from the tree line. No. One word. Quiet. Absolute. She is joining mine. Every head turned, Violet's included. A man stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the forest, and the torchlight caught him. And for a breath, Violet looked like a woman who had spent so long expecting abandonment that she did not recognize protection when it arrived. But this story does not begin here. It begins 3 days earlier, with a bucket and a rope, and a man whose hands told a different story than everything else about him. Chapter 1. Violet Neilwort had learned to be useful before she learned to be anything else. She was up before the kitchen fires, before the ranked wolves stirred in their beds, before the yard dogs lifted their heads from the frost-hardened ground. She drew water. She hung meat. She repaired what broke and replaced what wore out, and moved through the Neilwort compound, like something the place needed but had never thought to name. She was good at this, at being necessary without being noticed. It had taken years to perfect. She was tall for a woman, broad across the shoulders, built like her mother had been, with the kind of frame that suggested she could work from dawn to dark without stopping, because she could, and did. Her hair was dark brown, cropped to her jaw because long hair got in the way. Her eyes were blue, bright and sharp and wrong, her father had told her once, when she was small enough to believe that the things fathers said about their daughters were true. Every Neilwort wolf had gray eyes. Her mother's had been gray. Violet's were blue, and she had learned early that the wrong kind of different was a dangerous thing to be. She was not wolfless. She had known this since she was 9 years old, the night her mother died, and something inside her chest had cracked open like a seam giving way. And what crawled out was not the gray timber wolf every Neilwort child was supposed to carry. It was something else. Something that made the candle flames flatten and the yard dogs press their bellies to the frozen ground and whine. Her mother had grabbed her wrist with the last of her strength. "Do not show them," she had said. "Do not ever show them what you are." So Violet hadn't. 13 years of stillness. 13 years of pressing it down, locking it away, building a cage out of silence and routine, and the daily discipline of being exactly what was expected of her, which was nothing much. When the healers examined her at 12 and declared her wolfless, she let them. When her father's expression shifted from concern to something colder, she let that too. When the pack whispered that the alpha's only child was empty, broken, a dead end for the Neilwort bloodline, she said nothing, because nothing was the correct answer, and she had learned to give correct answers. It was easier to be nothing than to be the wrong kind of something. She was thinking about this, the way she often did when her hands were occupied and her mind had nowhere useful to go. On the morning her father summoned her to the Longhouse and told her that a delegation from the northern coastal territories would be arriving in 3 days for a border review, she stood across the desk from him and waited. Terracus did not look up from his maps. "You will remain in the east quarters during the inspection," he said. "You will not speak to any member of the delegation. You will not be present at any formal gathering. You will not be seen." Violet said nothing. "Do you understand?" "Yes," she said. She left without asking why. She knew better than to ask why. The answer was always the same thing wearing different words. Because I said so. Because it is safer. Because you are a problem I have been managing for 22 years, and I am very tired of managing it. She went to the training yard and worked the post with her staff until her palms were raw, and the wolf in her chest pressed against the cage and said nothing either, because the wolf had learned from her, or she had learned from it, and by now neither of them could remember which came first. The delegation arrived 2 days early. Violet was in the smokehouse when she heard the horns. 2 short blasts, 1 long, visitors from the western road, and she climbed down from the upper rack and went to the narrow window that faced the main gate, because she was curious, and curiosity was one of the few things she had never managed to suppress. 6 riders, gray cloaks the color of storm cloud, horses well fed and steady. At the front, a man on a black gelding whose tack was plain and unadorned. No silver, no banners, nothing that announced rank except the way the other 5 riders kept their formation around him, the way water moves around a fixed point. She could not make out his face at this distance. She stepped back from the window and finished her work. She did not think about the riders again that afternoon. She saw him the next morning by accident. Violet was crossing the back courtyard at dawn, heading for the well with the bucket in her hand, when she came around the corner of the smokehouse and nearly walked into a man standing alone in the gray light, looking out at the tree line with his hands clasped behind his back. She stopped. He turned. He was older than her by some years, with ash-brown hair pulled back from a face that was more weathered than handsome. A strong jaw, dark blue eyes, the kind of features that suggested the outdoors had shaped them more than any indoor life had. He wore a plain dark shirt with the sleeves pushed to the elbow, and no coat despite the cold. And his hands, when he turned, were visible at his sides. Working hands, calloused across the palm, scarred at the knuckles. Not the hands of a man who let others carry things for him. "I didn't mean to," she started. "Mean to what?" His voice was low, not loud, the kind of voice that expected to be heard without raising itself. "To be here," she said. "I was told to keep to the east quarters." Something shifted in his expression. Small, gone quickly. "By whom?" "My father." He looked at her for a moment, the weight of it specific and unhurried, the way very few people had ever looked at her. "You're the one they say is wolfless," he said. Not a question. "And what do you say?" She hadn't expected that. Most people treated the accusation as a fact that required no response, least of all hers. "It doesn't matter what I say," she said. He held her gaze for a breath longer than was comfortable. Then he reached past her, took the rope from her hand, and hauled. He didn't explain the gesture. He didn't offer it. He simply did it. The way a person does something that seems obvious to them even when it isn't obvious to anyone else. When the bucket reached the rim, he set it down. "It matters," he said. "What you say about yourself always matters." Then he walked back across the courtyard without looking back. Violet stood by the well with the full bucket at her feet, and her hands empty, and the wolf in her chest doing something it had never done before. Not pressing against the cage, not rattling the bars, just listening. He was there the next morning. Violet came around the corner of the smokehouse with the bucket in her hand and found him already at the well, leaning against the stone rim with his arms crossed and his face turned toward the tree line. He straightened when he heard her footsteps. He did not pretend he had not been waiting. She was not sure what to do with that. "You're early," she said. "So are you." "I have work." "I know," he said. "I'll help." She almost told him not to. The refusal was already formed. She had spent 22 years refusing help because accepting it created debt, and debt created obligation, and obligation was a thing she could not afford. But he had already taken the rope, and the bucket was already descending, and the moment for refusal had passed without her quite catching it. She watched him haul and said nothing. His name was Killian. That was all she knew about him. That and his hands, and the fact that he asked questions, and then went quiet in a way that suggested he was actually listening to the answers, rather than waiting for his turn to speak. She did not know which part of the delegation he belonged to. She had not asked. It seemed safer not to ask. The same way it seemed safer not to stand too close to the fire in a room where the fire was the only warm thing. "You said it doesn't matter what you say," he said, without looking up from the rope. "About yourself." She had not expected him to remember that. "I said it," she agreed. "Do you believe it?" The question landed differently than she'd anticipated. Not like an argument, not like a challenge. Like genuine curiosity from someone who had not yet decided what he thought. "I think," she said carefully, "that it doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is what the people around me decide." He was quiet for a moment. The bucket reached the rim and he set it down. "That's a very efficient way to disappear," he said. It was not cruel. It was not kind. It was simply accurate. And accuracy from a stranger was strange enough that she didn't answer him immediately. "Where are you from?" she asked instead. "The coast. Is it different there?" He considered this with more seriousness than the question probably warranted. "In some ways. The packs are older. The hierarchies run deeper." A pause. "The wolves who don't fit the expected shape have a harder time of it." He paused again, and then said, "I imagine that's why you stay hidden. Fear of what they'd do if they saw." Violet said nothing. He wasn't wrong, exactly. Fear was part of it, but fear was the simplest part, the part that made sense to someone looking in from outside. The rest of it was older and more complicated, and had her mother's voice wound through it so tightly she couldn't have separated the two even if she'd wanted to. She picked up the bucket. "Something like that," she said. "You're not just talking about the coast," she said. "No," he said. "I'm not." She picked up the bucket. She should go. The kitchen fires would need tending, the ranked wolves would be stirring soon, and she had already spent more time at this well than she could easily explain. But her feet did not move, and the wolf in her chest had lifted its head the way it did sometimes when something worth paying attention to was happening. "Why do you come here in the mornings?" she asked. "I like the quiet before the day starts. You could find quiet anywhere in a compound this size." "I could," he agreed. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The silence that followed was the kind that held its shape. Not uncomfortable, not empty, just present. The kind of silence that two people only fall into when neither of them is performing anything for the other. Violet could not remember the last time she had been in a silence like that. She went back to the kitchen. She tended the fires. She moved through the morning the way she always moved, efficiently, quietly, without drawing attention. And she told herself that the conversation at the well was nothing. A stranger passing through. 3 days, and he would be gone, and the compound would return to what it always was, which was a place she survived rather than a place she lived. She believed this completely until the third morning. The third morning she woke before her usual hour, dressed in the gray light before dawn, and took the bucket from its hook by the door. She was halfway across the yard before she understood why she had risen early. She stopped walking. The bucket was cold in her hand. The frost on the ground cracked softly under her boots. Somewhere in the trees beyond the wall, a bird was beginning the first tentative sounds of morning. She had risen early to get to the well before the compound stirred. She had risen early to make sure she arrived before he left. The realization sat in her chest alongside the wolf, and the wolf did not rattle the cage or press against the bars. It simply looked at her with the patience of something that had been waiting a long time to be acknowledged. She stood in the frost for another moment. Then she walked to the well. He was already there. She did not go to the well on the fourth morning. She told herself it was because she had other work. The grain store needed inventory. The east fence had a post that had been leaning since the first frost. And she had already spent too many mornings standing at a well, talking to a man she did not know. She told herself this while she lay in the dark of her room, listening to the compound wake around her, and she almost believed it. The wolf in her chest said nothing. It had been saying nothing for 3 days now, not the caged silence she was used to, the pressed down, locked away quiet of something being actively suppressed. This was different. This was the silence of something that had found a frequency it recognized and was listening very hard to make sure it didn't lose it. She did not know what to do with that, either. She got up. She went to the grain store. She counted sacks in the gray morning light and wrote numbers in the ledger she kept for tasks her father never acknowledged and the pack never thanked her for, and she told herself that the feeling in her chest was nothing. Proximity. Novelty. The simple animal response to being in the presence of someone who did not look through her. It meant nothing. The wolf disagreed, but quietly. She was back in her room by mid-morning, mending a section of harness that one of the senior betas had left outside her door without a note. Because leaving things outside her door without a note was how the ranked wolves communicated that they wanted something done and did not want to be seen wanting it from her. She had a needle in her hand and the harness across her knees when sleep took her without warning. Not gradually, not the slow drift of exhaustion, but suddenly, completely, the way sleep takes people who have been holding themselves tightly for a very long time. She dreamed of the forest. Not the forest beyond the Neilwort walls. She knew that forest, had memorized it in the years when she trained alone at the tree line, because the ranked fighters would not spar with her. This was a different forest. Older. The trees were enormous, their roots buckled and raised from the earth like the backs of sleeping animals, and the light that came through the canopy was pale and cold and thick as water. She was standing in a clearing, and she was not alone. The wolf stood beside her, not inside her chest, not locked behind the cage she had built for it, but beside her, solid and present, and enormous in a way that made her understand, even in the dream, that she had been wrong about its size. She had always imagined it as something manageable, something she could contain. Its shoulder reached her collarbone. Its paws left prints in the soft earth that were larger than both her hands spread flat. It turned and looked at her, and she saw her own eyes looking back. The same blue, the same sharpness, the same quality of seeing too much and saying nothing about it. And then she saw the color. White. Completely, absolutely white. The color of birch bark. The color of fresh snow before anything has walked through it. She had not known. All those years of pressing it down, locking it away, she had never once let it close enough to see what it actually was. She opened her mouth, and what came out was not words. It rose from her chest before she understood it was happening. Not a sound she chose, but a sound she had always been, rising through her throat and out into the pale, cold light of the dream forest, like something that had been waiting 13 years for a door to open. A howl, long and sustained and resonant, carrying a frequency she had no name for, only the bone-deep recognition that this was what she was. This was the sound her body had been built around, and every year of silence had been borrowed against this moment. The wolf beside her lifted its head, and then something answered, not from the dream, not from the forest or the pale light or the enormous trees, from somewhere else, somewhere outside the edges of sleep, somewhere real and close and absolutely certain. A howl that rose to meet hers the way a key rises to meet a lock, with the specific inevitability of two things made to find each other. She woke with her hand clamped over her mouth. The room was dark. The compound was quiet. The harness had fallen from her knees to the floor, and the needle was still in her hand, and her heart was hitting her ribs so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She lay still and listened. Silence. Then, from somewhere outside, somewhere beyond the east wall, somewhere far enough away that it should have been impossible to hear, the last note of something fading. Low and sustained, and already almost gone by the time she was awake enough to be certain it had been there at all. She pressed her face into the pillow. The wolf in her chest was not in the cage. She could feel it standing just inside her sternum, nose lifted, every line of it oriented toward the sound that had already disappeared, Not frightened, not frantic. The stillness of an animal that has just confirmed something it has always suspected and is taking a moment to understand what that means. She did not sleep again. She lay in the dark until the compound began to stir, until the kitchen fires started, and the yard dogs moved, and the ordinary sounds of morning assembled themselves into something familiar. And she told herself that it had been a dream, that the answering howl had been part of the dream, that there was a reasonable explanation for the sound and the frequency and the feeling of recognition so complete it had no room for doubt inside it. She told herself this with great conviction. The wolf did not argue. It simply stayed where it was, outside the cage, inside her chest, and waited for morning with the patience of something that already knew what morning would bring. Before we continue, if you felt something in this first chapter that made you want to stay, please subscribe to the channel. It takes 1 second, and it means a lot to me. Chapter 2. Her father sent for her that evening. She had been expecting it. Not the specific summons, not the exact hour, but the shape of it. The sense that the ground beneath her had been shifting for 3 days, and that Terracus Neilwart, who had spent 22 years monitoring that ground with the precision of a man who knew exactly what he was sitting on top of, had finally felt the change. She washed her hands. She straightened her shirt. She walked to the longhouse the way she always walked there, steadily, without hurry, giving nothing away in her body that she did not intend to give. The longhouse was empty except for her father and 2 of his ranked betas, standing at the edges of the room like furniture that had learned to breathe. The fire had burned low. The room smelled of old smoke and cold stone, and something else beneath it. Something sharp and sour that she recognized after a moment as fear wearing the clothes of authority. Terracus stood with his back to the fire. He looked at her when she entered. That alone was unusual enough to notice. "The man from the delegation," he said. "You've been speaking with him." "I draw water in the mornings," she said. "He walks the grounds early. We've spoken. That is all." "That is not all." He moved toward her, not quickly, not with anger, but with the deliberate weight of a man who had always used his size as punctuation. "He came to me yesterday, asked why my daughter does not eat with the pack, why she sleeps in the east quarters, why she has never been permitted to attend a gathering." Violet said nothing. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Terracus said, "that you are wolfless, that you hold no rank." A pause. The sharp, sour scent intensified. "He told me I was wrong." The room was very quiet. "He told me," her father continued, "that my daughter carries a wolf I should be proud of. That if I cannot see it, perhaps someone else should be given the chance." Violet's hands were steady at her sides. The wolf in her chest, outside the cage now, had been outside the cage since last night, lifted its head. "How does he know?" she asked. "I don't know how he knows." Terracus's jaw worked. "But he knows, and that means this ends tonight." He crossed to his desk. He did not look at her when he said it. He rarely looked at her when he said the things that mattered. She had noticed this her entire life, the way he directed his most important sentences at walls and windows and the middle distance, as though the words were easier if they didn't have to travel through eye contact. "You can stay," he said. She had not expected that. The same arrangement as always. East quarters. No gatherings. No contact with the delegation. He set both hands flat on the desk. "I will handle the man from the coast. I will tell him he was mistaken. You remain here, hidden, safe, and this ends without consequence." The fire popped. One of the betas shifted his weight. Violet looked at her father, at the broad set of his shoulders, the gray of his eyes, the brass wolf head pin on his lapel that caught the firelight. She had spent 22 years reading this room, this man, the precise architecture of his silences and his sentences, and she understood what he was offering her. The same life she had always had. Invisible. Contained. protected from everything, including herself. "And if I refuse," she said. Terekas looked up. It was the first time she had used that word to him. In 22 years she had said yes, and I understand, and I will, and of course. And she had said nothing, which was its own kind of yes, and she had said I see, which meant the same thing. And she had never once said refuse, because refusing required believing that her preference was a thing that existed and mattered. "You won't," he said. "I am," she said. "Right now. I'm refusing." The silence that followed was different from the silences she was used to. Those silences had weight, but no edges. This one had edges. "You don't understand what you are," Terekas said. And for the first time his voice carried something beneath the authority. Something older and rawer that she might have called fear, if she had ever seen him afraid of anything. A white wolf has not been born in 7 generations. The last one brought a war that killed 3 packs. If anyone beyond this territory discovers what you carry, every alpha within 100 miles will come for you. Some to claim you, some to destroy you, and they will burn everything around you to get to you. "I know," she said. "You don't, I know," she said again, more quietly. "I've known since I was 9 years old. I've known every morning I drew water before anyone else was awake. Every meal I ate after the ranked wolves finished. Every time a healer looked through me and wrote wolfless in a ledger and you let them." She paused. "I know exactly what I am. You made sure I knew it in the worst possible way, by never telling me." Terekas said nothing. His hands were still flat on the desk. His gray eyes were steady. But something behind them had shifted, the way the surface of water shifts when something moves beneath it, and she recognized it now for what it was. He had believed for 22 years that he was protecting her. She understood that. She could even hold it alongside everything else. The invisibility, the silence, the 22 years of eating last and sleeping farthest, and being managed like a liability instead of raised like a daughter. She could hold all of it, and still understand that somewhere inside the architecture of his control, there had once been something that looked like love. It was not enough. "I will not stay hidden," she said. "Not anymore." Terekas straightened. "Then you leave," he said. "Tomorrow. Before dawn." "No," she said. He looked at her. "Not before dawn," she said. "If I leave in the light, in front of everyone." She turned and walked out. Behind her, the fire had burned down to almost nothing, and neither of the betas moved to rebuild it, and Terekas Neilwart stood in the cooling room and said nothing at all. They called the gathering at sundown. It was customary. Banishments were public by tradition, witnessed by every ranked wolf, every elder, every child old enough to stand and understand what standing and understanding cost. The accused stood in the center of the clearing. The alpha spoke. The pack bore witness. It had been done this way for as long as the Neilwart pack had existed, and Terekas, whatever else he was a man who respected the machinery of tradition, even when he was using it to do something unforgivable. Violet walked into the clearing with her head up. She wore her charcoal vest over the pale linen shirt she had mended twice this winter. Her dark breeches were tucked into worn boots. Her storm gray cloak hung from her shoulders, clasped with the steel pin her mother had given her the year she died. She had dressed deliberately, slowly, the way a person dresses when they understand that what they wear into a room is also what they carry out of it. The crowd parted. Some of them looked away. Some watched with expressions she could not entirely parse, guilt folded inside relief, something that might have been shame if shame were a thing this pack still knew how to feel without swallowing immediately. She had fed some of these wolves, repaired their equipment, worked alongside them in silence for years without being acknowledged, and now they stood in torchlight and watched her father pronounce her dead to him, and none of them said a word. She had not expected them to. Terekas stood on the raised platform at the north end of the clearing. His black leather coat was buttoned to the throat. The brass wolf head pin on his lapel caught the torchlight. He looked at the crowd when he spoke. He did not look at her. "She is no longer my blood," he said. "No longer pack. No longer welcome on Neilwort land. She is unworthy of the Neilwort name. Not for what she has done, but for what she is. Any wolf who shelters her shares her exile." The torches guttered in a wind that smelled of pine and frost. Violet's hands were steady at her sides. She had practiced this too. Then a voice came from the tree line. "No. One word. Quiet. Absolute." Carrying the kind of authority that did not need volume because it had weight behind it. The weight of someone who had never needed to raise his voice to be heard, and knew it. Every head turned. A man stepped out of the shadows between two tall pines, and the torchlight caught the steel circlet on his brow. Ash-brown hair, dark blue eyes that swept the clearing the way a hawk surveys a field, not searching, assessing. Behind him, a woman with a bow across her back, and a jaw like a hatchet blade emerged from the same shadow, followed by 4 armed wolves in gray cloaks, who fanned out with the practiced ease of soldiers, who had done this precise thing many times before. Violet looked at him, at the circlet, at the cloak, at the 4 wolves positioned behind him with the unhurried certainty of men who had never once needed to hurry, at the hands she had watched haul a bucket from a well 3 mornings in a row. "She is joining mine," he said. Killian Barlow, Alpha King of the Northern Coastal Territories, commander of the Cliff Packs. The man who had told her, in a back courtyard at dawn with his sleeves pushed to the elbow, that what she said about herself always mattered. She had not known. She understood, in the space of a single breath, that he had known she did not know, and had chosen not to tell her. She held that understanding alongside everything else and decided, quietly, that she would think about what it meant later. Later was a place she could afford to visit once she was through this clearing. Terekas descended from the platform. "Your Majesty." His voice had changed. The authority was still there, the structure of it, but something underneath had gone hollow. "This is a pack matter, internal. It does not concern the crown. You are banishing a woman who carries a wolf," Killian said. His voice was the same as it had been at the well, unhurried, specific, expecting to be heard. "A wolf you have deliberately suppressed, a wolf that answered mine. She did not know she was doing it. That does not make it less true." He paused. "That concerns me." The clearing was very still. Terekas' hand moved toward his belt. Navera shifted her weight so slightly that only someone watching very carefully would have seen it. The shift was enough. Terekas' hand stilled. Killian turned from him. He turned to Violet. Only to Violet. The clearing, the torches, the 200 wolves holding their breath. All of it receded. He looked at her the way he had looked at her every morning at the well, with the same specific, unhurried wait, and he said, "You do not have to come with me." The words landed in the silence and stayed there. "I am not your father. I will not make this choice for you. You have a place in my pack if you want it. No conditions, no obligations, nothing owed." A pause, brief and precise. "But the choice is yours. The choice is yours." Violet stood in the clearing where the disgraced stood, and felt those words move through her the way the howl had moved through her in the dream, not landing on the surface of her, but going deeper, finding the place where the wolf was standing outside its cage for the first time in 13 years. Her father had chosen for her since the night she was born. The pack had chosen for her by deciding what she was before she could decide for herself. The silence, the invisibility, the careful architecture of a life built around not being seen. None of it had been her choice. It had been the accumulated weight of everyone else's choices, pressing down on her, until she had forgotten that her own preferences were a thing that existed. She looked at Terekas. He was watching her with gray eyes that were very still, and she understood. in the way she had always understood things about him that he never said aloud, that he believed she would stay, that she would look at the unfamiliar man with the steel circlet and the unfamiliar wolves in gray cloaks and choose the known thing, because the known thing was what she had always chosen. He had managed her for 22 years. He thought he still knew how. She looked at Killian. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he said. "You don't. I don't trust easily. I wouldn't expect you to." She held his gaze for a moment. The weight of it, the specific, unhurried attention that had felt every morning at the well, like something she had not known she was starving for until it was offered. Then she turned her back on her father and walked across the clearing toward the tree line. The 4 gray-cloaked wolves parted to let her through. She did not look back. Not once. The Neilwort compound felt different at her back than it ever had from the inside. Violet stood at the edge of the eastern tree line, while Killian's wolves broke down the camp they had made beyond the walls. Efficient, unhurried, the practiced movements of people accustomed to arriving and departing, without leaving evidence of either. The night was cold. The torches in the clearing behind her had been extinguished. She could hear the compound settling into silence, the particular silence of a place that has witnessed something it will spend a long time not talking about. She had nowhere to put her hands. This was the detail that kept arriving, not the cold, not the unfamiliar faces moving around her in the dark, not the fact that she had just walked away from the only home she had ever known. Her hands. She was accustomed to having work in them at all hours, something to carry or mend or haul, and now they hung at her sides with nothing to do. And the emptiness of them felt louder than anything else. Killian was speaking quietly with 2 of his wolves near the horses. He had not approached her since the clearing. She understood this as deliberate. He had said what he said. She had made her choice. And now he was giving her the space that choice required. She was not sure whether to be grateful or unsettled by how well he seemed to understand the shape of what she needed without being told. She filed that away alongside everything else she would think about later, footsteps beside her. Not his. Nevera came to stand at her left shoulder, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to be absent. She had her bow across her back and her arms crossed and her eyes on the tree line, and she did not say anything for long enough that Violet began to think she was not going to say anything at all. Then Nevera reached up, unclasped her cloak at the throat, and held it out. Violet looked at it. It was heavy wool, dark gray, still warm from the other woman's shoulders. Practical, unadorned, the kind of garment that had been chosen for function and had acquired character through use. "You're freezing," Nevera said. Not, "You've been through something tonight." Not, "You're safe now." Not, "It gets easier." Just the fact of the cold, stated plainly, and a cloak extended without ceremony. Violet took it. Nevera helped her settle it across her shoulders with the brisk efficiency of someone performing a task rather than offering a kindness. Which was, Violet was beginning to understand, how Nevera offered kindness. She adjusted the clasp at the front, gave it one firm pat as though confirming it was correctly installed, and dropped her hands. "We ride at first light," she said. 4 days to the coast. You'll share a tent with me the first 2 nights until we reach the way station." "All right," Violet said. "I don't talk much in the mornings. Neither do I." Nevera looked at her for the first time since approaching, a direct, assessing look that lasted exactly long enough to see what it was looking for. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once, the way a person nods when something has been confirmed that they suspected but needed to verify, and turned back to the tree line. They stood together in silence for a while. It was not uncomfortable. It was the same quality of silence she had fallen into at the well, the kind that held its shape without requiring anything from the people inside it. And she was beginning to suspect that this was rarer than she had previously understood. She had spent 22 years in silences that demanded things from her. Demanded she be smaller, quieter, less present, less herself. and the absence of that demand felt like setting down something very heavy that she had carried for so long, she had forgotten it had weight. The cloak was warm. She pulled it closer. Across the camp, Killian had finished speaking with his wolves and stood alone for a moment, looking at nothing in particular, or looking at the space between things, the way some people do when they are thinking about something they have not yet decided how to carry. He was still wearing the circlet. She looked at it in the firelight and tried to reconcile it with the man who had hauled a bucket from a well without being asked, and told her that what she said about herself always mattered. She found, somewhat to her surprise, that the reconciliation was not as difficult as she had expected. He was both things, the man and the king. She had met the man first, which meant she would always know that the king was built on top of something human. That seemed important, though she could not yet have said exactly why. He must have felt her looking, because he turned. Their eyes met across the camp. He did not smile, did not nod, did not offer any of the small social signals that people use to communicate across a distance. He just looked at her for a moment, the same specific, unhurried attention, and then turned back to whatever he had been thinking about. Violet looked away. Beside her, Nevera said nothing. The horses were nearly ready. The camp was nearly broken. Somewhere beyond the wall, the Neilwort compound was very quiet, and Violet stood at the edge of the trees in a borrowed cloak and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like someone who was standing somewhere rather than disappearing from it. He found her before she found him. She had not planned to seek him out. The camp was nearly ready, the horses stood waiting, and she had told herself that whatever remained between her and Terekas Neilwort had been said in the longhouse 2 nights ago, and did not require saying again. She had told herself this with reasonable conviction, until she turned from the tree line and found him standing 10 feet away in the gray pre-dawn light, alone, without his betas, without the authority his coat and pin usually lent him. He looked old. She had never thought of him as old before. He had always been simply large and cold and immovable, a fact of her life the way stone walls and winter were facts. But in the thin morning light, without the fire and the torches and the machinery of the pack arranged around him, he looked like what he was, a man in his middle years who had spent 22 years holding something very tightly and had just watched it walk away. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Violet said, "You knew before I was born. It was not a question." "Your mother told me," he said. "The midwife saw the signs, the coloring, the way the candles behaved." He paused. "I knew before she took her first breath, and you said nothing. I said nothing. For 22 years. Yes." She looked at him. He looked back. The distance between them was perhaps 8 feet and felt considerably larger. "Why?" she said. "And I want the real answer, not the one about protection." Something moved behind his gray eyes. Not guilt. She had not expected guilt, and she did not find it. Something older. Something that had been living alongside the decision for so long it had become indistinguishable from the decision itself. "Because I was afraid," he said. "From the moment she told me, I was afraid. A white wolf had not been born in my lifetime, or my father's lifetime, or his father's before him. I knew what it meant. I knew what would come if anyone found out." He stopped. "And I knew I could not protect you from it. I am a strong alpha. I am not strong enough for what would have come. So you made me nothing instead. I made you invisible. Those are the same thing." He did not answer. She had not expected him to. "You let me eat last," she said. "You let them call me wolfless. You let the healers write it in their ledgers, and you never corrected them. You let me believe for 13 years that something was wrong with me, that I was broken, empty, a dead end." Her voice was steady. She had not raised it. She found she did not need to. "You could have told me the truth. You could have told me what I was, and taught me to hide it myself. I was 9 years old when Mother died. I was not a child who could not be trusted. You were a child who could not be controlled, he said. Even then. The honesty of it landed between them like something dropped from a height. She had expected denial, or justification, or the version of the story where everything he had done had been for her. She had not expected him to simply say the true thing, that his fear had been as much about control as protection, that some part of him had known even then that a daughter who understood her own power would be a daughter he could not manage. She stood with that for a moment. I know you believed you were protecting me, she said. I know that's true. I'm not saying it wasn't. She paused. I'm saying it wasn't enough. Believing you're protecting someone while you're taking away every choice they have, that's not protection. That's just fear with a better name. Terekas said nothing. His jaw was set. His eyes were dry. He had the look of a man receiving something he had known was coming for a long time. Not a blow, not a collapse, but a settling. The moment when a structure that has been under pressure for years finally acknowledges the crack that was always there. Your mother, he said, was afraid too. Not of what you were, of what would happen to you because of what you were. She made me promise. I know. She loved you. I know that too. Violet looked at him steadily. So did you, in the way you knew how. She let that sit for a moment before she continued. The way you knew how wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough. But I know it was real. Something in his face shifted, just slightly. The thing behind his gray eyes moved again. And this time she could name it. It was grief. Not for what he was losing this morning. For what he had lost long before this morning without ever acknowledging it as loss. She had not come here to give him that. She had not come here to comfort him, or absolve him, or make his grief easier to carry. But she found she could name it without flinching, which was more than she could have done a week ago, and that felt like its own kind of information. I'm not coming back, she said. I know. And I'm not asking you to explain yourself further. We've both said what there is to say. He nodded once, slowly. She turned to go. Violet. She stopped. She did not turn around. He had not called her by her name since she was very small. She had forgotten what it sounded like in his voice. Not cold, not formal, not the calculated distance of an alpha managing a liability. Just her name. 2 syllables. The name her mother had chosen. I did not know how to be your father, he said. I knew how to keep you alive. Those are not the same thing. She stood with her back to him for a moment. Then she said, No, they're not. And she walked back toward the camp, toward the gray-cloaked wolves and the waiting horses, and the woman who had given her a cloak without making it mean more than warmth. And she did not look back, because she had said what she had come to say, and so had he. And some things do not require a final look to be finished. They are simply finished. The camp was ready when she arrived. Killian was already mounted. He looked at her when she came through the trees. The same look as always, the same specific, unhurried attention. And he said nothing, because nothing was the correct thing to say. And he seemed to understand that without being told. She took the reins of the chestnut mare from Nevera. She mounted, and when the horses moved forward and the Neilwort compound disappeared behind the tree line, she felt the wolf in her chest lift its head and breathe. A long, slow exhale, as though it had been holding its breath for 13 years, and had only now remembered that it didn't have to. They rode for 4 days. The first day nobody spoke much, which suited Violet. She rode the chestnut mare and watched the Neilwort territory recede behind them, the familiar tree line, the particular gray of the sky over packland she had known her entire life. And she waited to feel something large and definitive about leaving it. Grief, maybe, or relief. Something proportional to 22 years. What she felt, mostly, was tired. Not the exhaustion of the clearing or the sleepless night before it. Something older. the specific tiredness of a body that has been braced for impact for so long that it has forgotten how to stand any other way, and is only now, in the absence of the thing it was bracing against, beginning to understand how much effort the bracing required. Nevera rode on her left. Killian rode ahead. The 4 gray-cloaked wolves kept formation around the group with the same unhurried competence they seemed to bring to everything, and the road opened ahead of them through forest and field, and nobody required anything of her. And Violet found that she did not know what to do with that either. She was working on it. By the second evening, they made camp in a clearing beside a stream, and Violet helped with the horses, because that was something her hands knew how to do, and nobody told her she was doing it wrong, or looked surprised that she was doing it at all. Nevera showed her where the tent was without commentary. One of the gray-cloaked wolves, a quiet man named Fen, who communicated primarily through efficient gestures, handed her a bowl of something hot without being asked. She ate it. It was not different from the food she had eaten at the Neilwort compound, but she ate it sitting with the others around the fire, not after them, and not apart. And that was different enough that she had to look at the trees for a while, to make sure her face was doing what she intended. Later, when the camp had gone quiet and the fire had settled to coals, she lay in the dark of the tent and listened to Nevera breathing steadily beside her, and the horses moving softly at their picket, and the small sounds of the forest rearranging itself for the night. She was waiting for the wolf. This was what she had done for 13 years. Lay in the dark, and wait for the wolf to press against the cage and rattle the bars and remind her what she was carrying, and why it had to stay hidden. She had fallen asleep most nights to the sound of it. She had woken most mornings to find it already watching her from behind the bars, patient and silver-eyed and waiting. The bars were gone. She understood this intellectually. She had understood it since the night of the dream, since the howl that had crawled out of her chest without permission and been answered from across the dark. But understanding a thing and feeling a thing are not the same, and she had not yet found the place inside herself where they met. She found it now. The wolf was there. She could feel it clearly, not pressed against a barrier, not rattling or straining or trying to be contained. Simply present, standing in the open space of her chest the way an animal stands in a clearing when it has nowhere it needs to be. Calm, warm, breathing. She lay very still. She had been so certain, for so long, that if she ever stopped holding it back, something catastrophic would follow. Her mother's voice, the yard dogs pressing their bellies to the ground, the candle flames flattening. She had built her entire life around the certainty that what she carried was too large and too dangerous to exist without a cage. It was large. She had seen it in the dream, shoulder to her collarbone, paws like open hands, eyes like lantern light, but it was not pressing against her. It was just there. The way a thing is there when it belongs somewhere and knows it. She let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Outside the tent, the fire had burned to almost nothing, and the forest was very quiet, and somewhere ahead of them through the dark, the coast waited with its older packs and its deeper hierarchies, and everything she did not yet know about what her life was going to be. She did not know what came next. For the first time in 22 years, that felt less like a threat and more like a door. She closed her eyes. The wolf settled beside her. And for the first time since she was 9 years old, Violet Neilwort slept without keeping watch. The coast, when they reached it, smelled of salt and cold stone, and something older beneath both. The particular scent of a place that has existed long enough to have a memory of its own. Violet stood at the edge of the cliff on the 4th evening and looked out at the water, and did not think about the Neilwort compound, or her father, or the clearing with its torches, and its 200 watching wolves. She thought about the sea, about the way it moved without being told to, about the particular quality of the light on the water at this hour, gray and gold at the same time, neither one winning. Killian came to stand beside her. Not close, not far. The same distance he had kept since the clearing, the careful, unhurried distance of a man who understands that some things cannot be rushed without being broken, and has chosen not to rush them. They stood together for a while without speaking. Then he said, "It takes time. The coast. Most people need a few weeks before it starts to feel like somewhere rather than somewhere else." "How long did it take you?" she asked. He thought about it. "I grew up here. I don't remember it feeling like anywhere else." "That must be something," she said, "to know where you belong before you're old enough to doubt it." He looked at her. "Yes," he said quietly. "I imagine it must be." She looked back at the water. The wolf in her chest was calm, present, not pressing against anything, not waiting for permission, not holding its breath against the possibility of being discovered. Simply there, the way it would be from now on. Not a secret, not a danger, not a thing to be managed. Just part of her. The way it had always been, underneath everything. Some stories end with answers. This one ended with a door left open, and a woman standing in it for the first time. The wolf had never needed permission. Only she had. Thank you so much for being here until the very end. If this story stayed with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. I truly love hearing from you. And if you want more stories, subscribe, be part of my library. A new story is always waiting. I'll see you in the next one.